What we're going to do in this video is briefly go through the following. BIDMAS, which is the order of operations, or which things to do first when you're looking at an equation. We're going to look at positive and negative numbers and how they work in operations. What to remember when adding and subtracting, how to multiply, use multiplication grids and the lattice method, and then finally how to use the bus stop method for division. Let's make a start by looking at what we call BIDMAS. So this is the order in which we complete any mathematical operation. When we have more than one operation happening in an equation, we need to organise them into which operation comes first. Firstly, we calculate anything that's in brackets. No matter what that operation is, it should be done first. If there's more than one operation in the brackets, then the other BIDMAS rules apply to that. The next operation is called indices. This can be powers or roots of a number, and we'll be going through this in more detail in the later video. After that would be division or multiplication. I say or, as we have some discretion when it comes to which one of these we do first in a particular equation. And we'll look at this more closely in rearranging and solving equations videos in the algebra topic. Lastly, we have addition or subtraction, which again we have some discretion over which one we do first. Next, we're going to look at how to round numbers. In order to do that, we need to understand place value. Here we have a number, 7,654,321. So we start off here with 1 in the units column. We then have 2 in the tens column, 3 in the hundreds column, 4 in the thousands column, 5 in the tens of thousands, 6 in the hundreds of thousands, and 7 in the millions column. If we carry on going further up, it repeats with the tens of millions and hundreds of millions, and so on. We are normally asked to round to a certain place value or significant figure at the end of a question. And the reason for this is to maintain the level of accuracy until then throughout the equation. If we round a number, it uses the digit that comes after it to do so. If that digit is 5 or greater, the number to be rounded goes up. If it's 4 or lower, it goes down. So here we have 3,456. We're rounding this to the nearest hundred. So the 4 is in the hundreds place value. The number to the right of that is the 5, which is 5 or greater, so the 4 will be rounded up to 5 to give us 3,500. In this next example, we're going to round 6,543 to 3 significant figures. Significant figures are counted from the left-hand side after the first digit that is greater than 0. So 6,543 rounded to 3 significant figures. The first significant figure is going to be the 6, the second is going to be the 5, and the third one's going to be the 4. So that's the figure that we're going to round. The number that's to the right of that is a 3. Now that's 4 or less, so that 4 that we were looking to round is going to stay as a 4, and we can rewrite the number 6,540. Now let's talk about positive and negative numbers. So I've split these into 2 different operations. First of all, we've got addition and subtraction, and then we've got multiplication and division. Here, whilst we discuss addition and subtraction, you can see a number line. When we're talking about addition and subtraction, you have the operation and then you have the polarity of the number, whether it's positive or negative. As you can see, I've drawn 2 arrows, one going up the number line and one going down the number line. So here, if you add a positive, it moves up the number line and increases. And if you subtract a positive, it moves down the number line or decreases. The opposite is the case with negative numbers. If I subtract a negative number, it actually increases and goes up the number line. If I add a negative number, it decreases and goes down the number line. So in this equation, we have negative 3, subtract negative 9. So we're starting at negative 3, and because we're subtracting a negative, we're going to move up the number line. And we're going to move up the number line by 9 places. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And we end up on positive 6, which we write as 6, because we don't tend to write the positive symbol, we just assume that it's there. In this equation, we have negative 3 plus negative 9. And because I'm adding a negative, I'm going to be moving down the number line. We start at negative 3 and we move down 9 places. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And we end up on negative 12, which is what our answer is. We write negative 12, we must remember to write the negative symbol in front, because without that we'd assume that it was positive. The results don't necessarily end up positive or negative, but move in a positive or negative direction. Now let's talk about multiplication and division. This can be understood quite simply if you look at what the symbols are. So if you're multiplying two numbers, and both of the symbols on the numbers are positive, or both the symbols on the numbers are negative, the result, the answer, is going to be positive. If the symbols are different, the result's going to be negative. Here you can see if you have a positive, either multiplied or divided by a negative would give you a negative result, and also a negative multiplied or divided by a positive would also give you a negative result. Here we have negative 3 times negative 9. As a negative times a negative gives a positive answer, it's going to be positive 27. Here we have negative 3 times positive 9. As a negative times a positive gives a negative answer of negative 27. This is also the case when dividing. Negative 9 divided by negative 3 would give you a positive 3. Negative 9 divided by positive 3 is going to give you negative 3. Remember, in multiplication and division, if the same symbols will result in a positive answer, and different symbols will result in a negative answer. Next, we'll run through some important points when adding or subtracting. It's important to be aware of where the decimal point is, or if there isn't one, where it would be placed. We'll go through adding and subtracting decimals in more depth in the decimals video later on, which we'll put a link to in the description of this video. So here we're adding 456 and 78. We could make the mistake of lining them up incorrectly, which is something I often see happen in a class. So you line the 7 underneath the 4, which would mean that the 10s in the 78 are being added to the 400s in the 456. It's better to make sure that you line up the units with units and tens with tens and so on. So let's erase that and put that in correctly. Here we're adding the 6 to the 8, which would give us 14. We write the 4 underneath and the 1 underneath the next column. The 5 plus the 7 would give us 12, plus 1 would give us 13. Again, write the 3 here and the 1 underneath the next column. 4 plus the 1 being carried over would give us 5. So our answer is 534. In the next example, we're subtracting with the same numbers, 456 subtracting 78. So in this one, 456 take away 78. So we'll write it like this. Now we can't take 8 away from 6, so we're going to borrow from the next column over to the left. So we'll make the 5 into a 4, and we'll make the 6 into 16. 16 take away the 8 would give us 8. Now again, we can't take away 7 from 4. But the one thing we can do is borrow from the left-hand column again. So we'll make the 4 into 3, and we'll change the 4 into 14. 14 take away the 7 would give us 7, and then 3 take away nothing leaves us with 3. So we have our answer, 378. So now let's talk about multiplication and methods of multiplication. If we're talking about trying to do it in our heads, memorised times tables are really useful in order to complete a lot of things a lot quicker. There are some tricks to help you with your times tables, and you'll find plenty of them on the internet, such as using your fingers for the 9 timetable and so on. Along with multiplication, it's handy to realise that you can choose which way to see an equation. For instance, if you find 7 times 5 difficult, 5 times 7 might be easier to do, and it results in the same thing. You can also create a mental grid for larger multiplication. So if we tried 36 times 6, we could split it into 30 times 6, which would give us 180, and 6 times 6, which would give us 36, and then we can add those two parts together to get 216. But if we're talking about long multiplication, let's demonstrate through this example. So here I've written 456 and I've written it over 78. I've written the 78 on the bottom because it's easier to have the smaller number on the bottom. It causes less work. So we're going to start with the 8 from the units, and we're going to times it by the 6 to make 48. I'm going to write the 8 underneath and put the 4 above the next place value. 8 times 5 would give 40, and then I add that 4 on to give 44. I'm going to write the units of 4 underneath the 7 and put the 4 above the next 4. 8 times 4 would give 32, plus the 4 would give 36, and I can write that whole thing underneath the number line, 3,648. Now I'm going to multiply by the 7. Now we have to remember that the 7 is actually 70. So in order to deal with that, I'm going to take the 0 from the 70 and put it underneath the 8 here. Now I can carry on with the rest of the multiplication. 7 times 6 would give 42, so I write the 2 here underneath the 4 and put the 4 above the 5. 7 times 5 would give 35, plus the 4 would be 39. I'm going to write the 9 underneath the 6 and put the 3 above the 4. 7 times 4 would give 28, plus 3 is 31, to give us 31,920. Now I can add these two parts together. 8 plus 0 gives us 8, 4 plus 2 would give us 6, 6 plus 9 gives us 15, so I write the 5 underneath and carry the 1 across to the next column. 3 plus 1 gives us 5, and 3 gives us 3 underneath. And we end up with 35,568 as the answer to this question. There's also a grid method of multiplication where you can split the numbers out into their place values. So we can write these across the top in their place value, 400, 50 and 6. And then down the left hand side we can put 70 and 8. So we split these numbers out and put zeros in where we split the numbers out from. Then we can simply do 7 times 4, which gives 28, and then we can count the number of zeros to add after it. There's 2 with the 400 and 1 with the 70, so we put 28,000. Here we've got 50 times 70, so we can get 3,500, 35 and 2 zeros. 70 times 6, 42 plus the 0 would give us 420. Then we've got 8 times 400 on the next row, which would give us 32 plus the 2 zeros. 8 times 5 would give us 40 plus the 0 from the 50, which gives us 400. And 8 times 6, which gives us 48. What we can then do is we can add these down. So 420 plus 48 gives 468. 3,500 plus 400 gives 3,900. And 28,000 plus 3,200 would give us 31,200. We can take these here to this right hand side and write them, making sure again that the units match up with the units and the tens match up with the tens, etc. And we can add these down. So we get 0 plus 0 plus 8 would give us 8, 0 plus 0 plus 6 would give us 6, 2 plus 9 would give us 11, plus the 4 would give us 15. So we'll write the 5 under here, and we'll write the 1 on the top to remind us to add it to the next column. 1 plus 3 would give us 5, and then 3 at the end we can just bring down to make the 3 there. And we end up with 35,568. Lastly, for multiplication, there's also what's called a lattice method as well, where you can split the digits up and draw diagonal lines through the boxes. So we can place the digits around the outside of this grid. The 7 and 8 go in here on the right hand side, and the 4, 5, 6 can go in at the top. We'll start from the 6 and move backwards to keep it all very much over to the right hand side. Now we can multiply the two individual digits together to get a number to go in this diagonal box. 7 times 6 would be 42, and you write it the 4 at the top and the 2 in the bottom. 7 times 5 would be 35, 7 times 4 is 28, and then you can move on to the next row down. 8 times 6 would give 48, 8 times 5 would give 40, and 8 times 4 would give 32. Now we add these up diagonally across. So 8 is on its own, so we'll just transfer that down here. 2 plus 4 plus 0 would give 6. 4 plus 5 is 9, plus 4 would give 13, plus another 2 would give 15. We'll write the 5 here, and then we'll put a 1 in the next diagonal column. 3 plus 8 is 11, plus the 3 is 14, plus this 1 that's been carried over is going to be 15. We'll write the 5 here, and again put a 1 into the next row. 2 plus that 1 would give us 3. So we can now read our answer around this outside left corner. So you get 35,568, as we found in the other multiplications as well. So there's 3 forms of multiplication there. If you're studying this in the run-up to your GCSEs, I would say find a method that you've found work in the past and stick with it. Some of them are more complicated than others. Find the one that you think works and continue to use that, but just make sure to check your answer to make sure you're getting them right. Lastly, let's go through division, and we tend to call this method the bus stop method, or short division. So we're doing 279 divided by 3. The number that we're dividing, the 279, we're going to put underneath the bus stop. The 3 we're going to put on the outside. Make sure when you've written the number under the bus stop that you've left plenty of room for any remainders underneath it. So we need to first of all think how many 3's go into 2, and of course none, because 3 is larger than 2. So we're going to write 0 above the 2. 0 times 3 gives us 0, and if you take that away from 2 you end up with a remainder of 2. So we're going to cross the 2 through and we're going to write 2 next to the 7 to make 27. How many 3's go into 27? Well, the answer to that is 9. 9 times 3 gives us 27, and we can subtract that from the 27 to give us 0 as a remainder. So I'll write the 9 above the 7, and our remainder of 0 I'll write here next to the 9. How many 3's in 9? Well, 3. 3 times 3 is 9, so again we have nothing left over. So we can see the answer that we've got there is 093, so the answer to our equation of 279 divided by 3 is going to be 93. Through this video about operations, we've looked at how to round numbers using the digit after the one being rounded. We briefly went through the key elements of what to remember when adding and subtracting, and the importance of carrying over and borrowing when doing those operations. We looked at several methods of multiplication, and like I say, choose the one you feel most comfortable with and continue to use it and check your answers. And we looked at the bus stop method, or short division. I hope you found this video useful. We'll move on to the next video, which is going to be about factors, multiples, and prime numbers. I'll see you then.